right, hello and welcome to Boxing Backstage Review. Of course, this is your one-stop destination where we decode all the super showdowns that have happened. It is for you guys, the true diehard boxing fans, and we're hoping this is one of many such shows that we bring to you. Of course, this one is presented by Red Corner Sports Promotions. So thank you so much for joining us here today, and we're going to look at a few key showdowns, key fights that have happened over the last few hours, and to take us through those, of course, will be a very special guest. Joining us is Kevin Noone, who is the Secretary General of the WBC Asia Boxing Council. Very fortunate to have him on the show today. So I'm just going to welcome him to this show. Thank you so much, Kevin. I know it's a Sunday, but it's a working Sunday for you, clearly.
Good afternoon, Rupan, and hello to all the boxing fans in India. Of course, we have a tremendous sporting country, India, so we're looking forward to crowning more. Before I talk about last night, the WBC is looking forward to crowning more champions from India. Of course, we have our dear Niraj Goyat, was a former WBC Asia champion, wow. And looking forward to seeing more boxing, professional boxing in India in the coming years.
That would definitely be exciting, Kevin. And if it is anything, even a shade of what is to go by that we've had over the last few hours, I'm sure it'll be very engaging. We have three fights that we're going to probably decode with you here today. And before we get to the much talked of, the fight that had a lot of chatter going on the social media, the Whyte Povetkin one. Before we get to that, we have to speak about, of course, the two ladies who took center stage. We're gonna speak about the Katie Taylor and the Delphine Persoon fight. Before we get to that encounter, of course, Kevin, to speak about that, of course, Taylor coming on top of that very convincingly, and Persoon says that herself. Just a word on Persoon. How competitive and how difficult an opponent is she, despite the fact that she isn't as accomplished as Taylor?
I mean, if you think about Delphine Persoon, what she has done, she's not a full-time boxer. I think that's the biggest contextual input into her career. She's a police officer in Belgium. That's her full-time job. So boxing is part-time. Now, Katie Taylor, on the other hand, is a full-time boxer. She lives in Connecticut in the United States, training at Ross Enemy's gym. I'm not taking anything away from Katie Taylor. Of course, I'm an Irishman. But we're talking about Persoon. She has been an incredible WBC champion, an incredible ambassador, not just for boxing, but for females in sport, to show them that it's possible to have a full-time job and get to a high level in sports. And no barriers, and nobody says no. So she has been an incredible ambassador. And if you watched, which I know you did, her post-fight interview, how gracious was that?
I was just going to ask you that, Kevin, and thanks for leading me into it. That is sportsmanship of the highest level. She says, "I respect the result," and to see them both kind of applauding each other, wonderful. That was wonderful.
Yeah, it was tremendous to see, and a lovely embrace. Off camera, there was a little bit of it on camera, but I'm told off camera they had a very warm embrace, which is great to see. But because at the end of the day, sport is about connectivity and breaking down barriers, global barriers, and humanity and everything.
Yeah, and of course Taylor also saying that it was a great advert for the sport itself, and she felt that this encounter did it. There was one thing also that Delphine said, Kevin, and I want you to throw more light on that. She says, "I couldn't hurt her enough." Because that's what's important if you need to get the better of someone like a Taylor, who's, especially going by the way she fights. What is it that she was talking to? I mean, you'd be in the best position to say that.
So Delphine was talking about her power. And she alluded to in the interview about she's looking to drop down to super featherweight because now she'll have power at super featherweight and she doesn't need to worry about forcing the extra weight on top of her body and forcing herself to eat and try to generate power that's just not there. Now she's an aggressor.
Yeah, we saw that. Love to crowd her opponent and hustle all the time. Yeah.
God help anyone at super featherweight taking on her in the next 12 to 18 months. brave women to raise their hands to take on her at 130 pounds. She will be an incredible adversary for anyone in the super featherweight division.
But going by how Taylor kind of displayed a bit of her skills on the night, Kevin, she was able to, because we saw Delphine was not letting her, she was relentless. She was trying to, crowd her, push her. How was she, what was most impressive about the way she tackled that?
Experience, ring experience. Katie Taylor is the most decorated female amateur boxer of all time, a former Olympic gold medalist. But if you go back pre-2012, there was a period between 2004 and 2012 where she won pretty much everything in the amateur female scene. Trained by her dad, Peter Taylor, in a small town outside of Dublin in Ireland. She was just an incredible. So I come back to answer your question. Experience, movement, vision, defensive awareness, negative awareness. But then when you have someone so aggressive and so relentless as Persoon coming at you, you don't have time to think. Your boxing computer doesn't have time to download and process. Yeah. So just Taylor's performance was quite incredible too. I know there was a lot of controversy in the first fight in New York. I believe Taylor, I think the context here is they have fought 20 rounds, 6 highly professional judges all scored the bout to Taylor over 20 rounds. And I think today we had 3 of the finest judges in the UK covering that fight, so I think they got it right. I scored it 96-94 myself, so I agreed with 2 of the judges. Definitely would never criticize any judge being a ring official. That's not what it's all about. We're all there to, you got to remember, of course, 3 different angles, 3 different views of the fight. Yeah. So, and being ringside and judging on the TV sometimes can be very different.
Yeah, very different. But yes, a great performance there, and of course, quite convincing, especially when you saw like you said, like you mentioned, the post-match interview of the 2 of them. Very gracious, and it was what a great way to kind of kickstart things in a sense in a year that's been quite not so pleasant, Kevin. But moving on to the next one, I know everyone's most talked of fight was Dillon White and Alexander Povetkin. And of course, you're laughing as we speak about this because what an encounter that was, Kevin. And before we get into round 4 and round 5, and I want you to completely take charge there, White definitely looked in control in the first 3 rounds.
I think what I was most impressed about Dillon White in rounds 1, 2, and 3 was his patience. He was very virtuous in his patience and his approach, the way he was looking to systematically break down, leading with the jab. But when you go in against a guy with the experience that Povetkin has, it's always there. But to answer your question, rounds 1, 2, and 3, very impressed by White, very impressed by his diligence, his patience in those opening 3 rounds. He bossed. He was commanding the contest. At times he was making Povetkin show his age in those opening rounds, especially in the round 2 and 3. The opening stanza, it was a tentative affair, but yeah, Dillon White was very impressive and a new body shape for him as well. He was in really athletic for a heavyweight. I guess that time he spent the lockdown in Portugal in the warm weather camp, so I guess that definitely helped his physique rather than the climate in the UK. So yeah, rounds 1, 2, and 3, it was all Dillon White, and I was tracking all the social media like the boxing journalists on Twitter during the fight. They were all saying Dillon White,
Exactly. I mean, we'll come to round 5, which was, I mean, it just has that like the hand over the mouth kind of moment, of course. We'll come to that in a bit. But round 4, flooring someone like Povetkin twice, that was something. He was definitely looking at in some serious bit of trouble, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at Povetkin's previous losses, he visits the canvas. He's a big, awkward guy, and he seems to visit the canvas on a few occasions. But today, Dillon White was emphatic in the way he put him to the canvas. And I guess at the end of round 4, everyone's writing his victory. Yeah. Everybody was doing it. I have to admit myself, I was like, wow. So I was already thinking ahead, as he's our mandatory, what's next? When is that?
When will he play Fury? When is that going to happen? When is all of that? Yeah, you start thinking, and Povetkin comes back in round 5 and says, hold on, guys. this match isn't over.
Yeah.
How incredible was round 5? Kevin, please take it away. How incredible was it?
I was talking to I was texting one of my boxing friends. He works for the WBC Asia media team during the fight, and he's a boxing aficionado. He's an almanac of boxing, and he kept texting me. He said, "Olympic champion, former world champion, Russian. These guys are so tough. You never write them off." And then when he set the jab, and then when it was incredible. It's going to be, that KO will be top of highlight reels for decades to come. People, heavyweights will study it, middleweights, lightweights, the positioning. Everyone forgot about the jab. The jab set up. It wasn't there's no such thing as a lucky punch in boxing. If you're a boxing guy, you understand the terminology lucky punch is used so incorrectly by individuals. It was calculated, it was cold, and it was effective.
Kevin, somewhere in one of the interviews right after that bout, of course, I read that apparently he and his team were watching videos of Whyte, and that shot, which was the knockout shot, the shot of the day in many ways, was something that he trained to do against Whyte. How much do these boxers actually do? How much of prep happens before they enter the ring, Kevin?
Oh, it's incredible. I've been quite blessed in my career in boxing as an administrator for the WBC to get an insight to this, especially here in Thailand. I live here in Bangkok, and Sisaket Sorungvisai, who's the former WBC super flyweight world champion 2-time. I have seen how they study tapes and how they analyze boxers, and of course in the States as well. It has become a big part of the sport. A lot of boxing trainers, old school boxing trainers, believe everything happens in the gym, but everything happens also in the study room. There's a lot of it now, studying tapes, analyzing weaknesses, and if that's true what you're saying, that's evidence that can bring fruition.
Where does Whyte go from here, though, Kevin? Because you're looking at a guy who, contender for world title. The matchup with Fury, there was so much that was built around him. What does it do to his confidence? Because he apparently says right after the match, I need the rematch. So that's on the cards as well. That's something we'll probably be looking forward to. But what does this do to Whyte personally?
I think we got to remember, because he got knocked out, it's mandatory under British Boxing Board of Control rules that he had to go to get a medical examination. So there was no post-fight interviews for him. So obviously the promoter of Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, took his place in front of the mic. Now he's speaking for Dillian White. At the end of the day, Dillian White is Dillian White, the only one who can decide. Yes, there's a rematch clause, we believe. Yeah, Dillian White is the only one who can decide what's next for Dillian White. Yeah. We don't know. We don't know what that can do to the psychology of the human mind. I mean, he was all set with all the media talk over the past 10 days was about he's mandatory. Everyone, I think, I'm not going to say Dillian White because I can't speak for him, but so many people in the boxing world were overlooking this fight.
Yeah.
They were thinking about the mandatory position. And unfortunately, you got to give respect to Dillian White to take on Povetkin. They could have cherry-picked a much easier opponent if they wanted to. Credit goes to Matchroom and Dillon White for taking that against a proven competitor, former Olympic gold medal, former world champion, and a guy who has only lost 2 fights in his life as a pro, Vladimir Klitschko and Anthony Joshua. And they're 2 of the top 5 heavyweights in the last 15 years.
Absolutely, but nice words. I mean, that's an interesting perspective you give, Kevin, on the big-hearted Dillian, in this situation, because I know after this kind of fight, the mental space, we're talking about that. We're talking about how in a very brutal, grueling sport that boxing is, there's so much that happens right between the years, and in that sense, how do you foresee Whyte taking stock of things from here on? Do you think this would affect him a lot more than what he'd expect?
I don't know him personally. I know some people who do know him. If you watch all of he has had a lot of difficulties and adversaries in his life. So I think he's a competitor. He will come back. They will invoke the rematch clause. And he will look to come back to make a statement against Povetkin possibly in November, December.
Yeah.
But the big one is gone for now. The mandatory position is gone. He has to climb again. I would love to see it happen. He's a great ambassador for boxing. He's an inspiration for the young people, not just in his communities in England, but boxing fans around the world. So it would be, and everyone loves to see a success story. When you fall, people love to see you rise again.
You know, of course, I'm just being told, and everyone's already, like you said, Kevin, everyone's already kind of foreseeing or looking forward to that rematch, kind of already talking about it. There's already banter around it. And Anthony Joshua has predicted that Povetkin will knock out Dillian. Of course, he's already he said that probably before this one. I don't think anyone saw that coming. It's other than the people that you were mentioning, Kevin, who said you can never underestimate a Russian boxer of the stature of Alexander. But no one, I think, saw this coming.
No, I think that boxing journalists and boxing people, their job is to always kind of hedge their bet, even though they're saying Dillon White. It's their job to hedge and say, "Oh, hold on a second, Povetkin can win," because there's two competitors in the ring. But I agree with you. I don't think anyone expected that, foresaw that, or gambled on that outcome.
Right. Of course, one of the most interesting encounters from last night. But the one that we want to round up this show with, of course, is Shawn Porter taking on Sebastian Formella. How would you call that one? How would you call that one, Kevin? Would you say Formella was more resolute, or would you say Porter missed a few tricks?
Shawn Porter, let me just start. He is an incredible human being. He is. My first time meeting him was in Kiev 2 years ago at the WBC convention, and I was in the gym in the morning, and I was in awe. I was like, I get starstruck when I see these guys, and he was so friendly and so just open. And he was later on that day, he was telling a story about when he was a kid in Las Vegas. He went to one of the WBC conventions with his dad, and he told the late WBC president, Don Jose Suleiman, that one day he would become a WBC world champion. And of course, 2018, he beat Danny Garcia to become the WBC welterweight champion of the world. He's a humanitarian. I'll get to the boxing in it. I just want to give an insight into the individual, because he's a fantastic human being and a wonderful guy to see in the ring. And if you meet him, even though he's ripped and shredded and in great condition, you would never, his demeanor, it doesn't come across as a guy who could hurt someone in the ring. But coming to the fight, Formella was a undefeated coming into last night's fight. A very well thought of welterweight in Europe. But Shawn Porter is just ferocious. He's relentless. His combinations. It was a shutout. I mean, the judges' scores, 120, 108, all three judges.
Also, landing record number of punches. How does it work when it comes to, you speak about Porter, the person, before we get to the boxing, of course, Kevin, and that says a lot about the kind of boxer he is. How much does the personality of a boxer off the ring reflect on the way he is as a competitor inside the ring?
That's so difficult to gauge. Let's go back to the Dillon White Povetkin fight. All week during the build-up to the fight in the UK, Matchroom on their YouTube channel have got the pre-fight insights. There was no insight to, in fact, Dillon White and his team were kind of making jovial jokes about Povetkin just sitting there, making comparisons to the character in the Rocky movie in terms of not giving interviews. Obviously, there's a language barrier, but then you have someone like Shawn Porter who's just you wouldn't even know he's a boxer. He's just so open and kind and caring and talkative. I'm not saying Povetkin's not kind and caring, but you don't see that side of him because he doesn't give interviews. But then I think there's a switch. When you get into the ring, it's instinct. It's instinct that's bred into you. Of course, Shawn Porter, he has a blessed relationship with his dad. His dad is his trainer. His dad has been with him the entire journey. Without trying to sound corny or like make it like a movie, but he's been with him literally since day one. And you can see that relationship between them. And if you go back and you watch the tape of when he beat Danny Garcia and became the champion, the WBC gave Shawn Porter's dad a beautiful commemorative WBC Trainers World Championship belt. And you could just see the heartfelt connection between father and son to become world champion. To answer your question, I think a switch turns on. Like you watch Shawn Porter against Formella. Yes, it went the distance. It went the full 12 rounds.
Yes.
But he was just, you can see that he enjoys it. It's almost not a job to him. It's just like a hobby. And what a great hobby. Get paid X amount of money, be live on TV all around the world, and showcase your skills for everyone to see. Incredible.
Yeah, it was. And of course, that kind of wraps up our boxing backstage review. But just final thoughts and final words from you, Kevin. What was among these three, which was the bout that you most enjoyed, or probably that you? I mean, I'm not going to say the obvious, but why don't you tell us what was your pick fight of the night?
I think from a nationalistic point of view, I grew up in Ireland, and I've known Katie Taylor as followed her career since I'm a huge amateur boxing fan for a decade and a half. That was very satisfying to see her cement her place as the undisputed lightweight champion of the world.
Yeah,
she has our belt, the WBC belt, and she's undisputed across the board. The performance of the night, regardless of what happened before round 5, you've got to go with Povetkin. He's the new WBC heavyweight diamond champion. He's the new WBC interim heavyweight champion. The world is his oyster now. I mean, you can't write this. You cannot write that it's incredible. 40 years of age. He went from possibly having the last fight of his career last night. He's now the interim heavyweight champion. He's now the diamond belt champion. And he could possibly, there's nothing set in stone, face Mr. Fury, or the winner of the Fury Wilder, or AJ. We don't know. There's a whole myriad of complications coming, but these are good complications. On a great note, what a fantastic night for boxing. You're in India, I'm in Thailand, boxing fans all over the world. We stayed up all night on this side of the world to watch that, and the energy and the good feeling it gives you, considering all the hurt and angst that's going on around the world right now. I mean, it's great to have something positive to enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. Yeah, I agree that point that you bring about how, at the times like this, for boxing to display one of the most beautiful nights with some amazing camaraderie, respect, and some amazing action as well. I think that does really good for the sport, and we only hope to see more such encounters. Of course, like you mentioned, Tyson Fury versus Povetkin. Why not? That would be a nice one too. But yes, Kevin, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and we hope to see more of you working on Sundays. But yeah, we hope to see more of that as well. Thank you so much for joining us here on Boxing Backstage Review.
Thank you. Bye-bye.